My name is Lena Ross. I'm 30 years old. And the night my family threw me out, I learned something I'll probably never forget. In some families, the loudest lie always wins. My older sister stood in our front yard sobbing so violently it looked like her entire world had collapsed. She pointed straight at me while my parents watched from the porch. "She ruined my marriage," she cried. "She's the reason Daniel left me." My mother didn't ask a single question. Not one. My stepfather didn't ask for proof either. He just stared at me like I was something rotten he'd accidentally stepped on. "Get out," he snapped. "You don't belong in this house anymore." Then he started throwing my things outside. My shoes landed in the damp grass. My backpack hit the driveway. A framed photo of my college graduation slid across the concrete and cracked against the curb. Behind him, my sister kept crying harder. She introduced him to that woman, she sobbed. If Lena had stayed out of my life, none of this would have happened. I knew she was lying. I knew it the second the words left her mouth. But something strange happens when the people who raised you refuse to even look at you. When your mother stares at the ground and your father nudges your suitcase off the porch with his foot like it's trash, truth starts to feel small. Smaller than anger. Smaller than humiliation. Smaller than the weight of being unwanted. So I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I picked up what I could carry, walked down the driveway, and left. 1 week later, I was sitting alone in a tiny rented carriage apartment on the north side of Charleston, a book open in my lap I hadn't actually read a single page of. I was still trying to teach my body what quiet felt like again. That's when my phone buzzed. An email. The sender made me sit up straight. The subject line made my stomach drop. I opened it. Read it once. Then again. And by the time I reached the attachment at the bottom, I understood exactly why my sister had been so desperate to blame me before anyone asked questions. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded. "My sister, please, don't send that email. My mom. We were wrong. Please give us a chance. My stepfather, Lena, we need to talk." Then another message. "Come home." I stared at the screen for a long time. All I could see in my mind was that broken picture frame lying in the driveway. Finally, I typed 2 words. No, never. But before I show you what was inside that email, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy it. And let me know in the comments what time it is, where you are right now. The following section contains some fictional elements and is AI-assisted for storytelling and educational purposes, and is completely unrelated to any individual or group. I hope you enjoyed this story. If not, please get some rest, stay healthy, and see you again soon. The night I was thrown out wasn't the beginning of my sister's lie. It was only the moment it finally found an audience. A week after leaving my parents' house, I moved into a tiny carriage apartment on the east side of Charleston. The place had thin walls, narrow stairs that creaked when you climbed them, and a crooked kitchen drawer that refused to close all the way, no matter how carefully you pushed it. Above the sink, there was one small window. It faced nothing but a brick wall. The apartment wasn't beautiful, not even close, but it was mine. And there was something oddly comforting about living somewhere no one could suddenly decide I didn't belong. I worked as a collections manager at the Charleston Maritime History Museum, which sounds far more impressive than it actually is. Most days, my job involved preserving old navigation charts, cataloging rusted instruments recovered from shipwrecks, and handling artifacts that had survived storms, war, salt water, and time. For years, I believed that kind of work made me calm under pressure. After what happened with my family, I realized it mostly meant I was good at dealing with damaged things. My older sister, Elena Ross, lived in a completely different world. She chaired charity galas, appeared in local lifestyle magazines, hosted elegant brunches, where half the guests seemed more interested in being photographed than helping anyone, and moved through Charleston society as if every room existed purely to spotlight her. Her husband, Michael Grant, was an architect. quiet, polite, careful with every word he spoke. He was the kind of man people trusted immediately because he never tried to draw attention to himself. To outsiders, Elena and Michael looked like the perfect couple. To people who knew Elena well enough, they looked managed. 3 days after I moved into the carriage apartment, my best friend Tara Bennett showed up at my door with takeout containers, 2 paper plates, and enough anger on my behalf to heat the entire building. Tara designed museum exhibits for a living. She wore paint smudges on her jeans like they were part of her personality, and once got banned from a donor luncheon for telling a board member his vision was just expensive nonsense with terrible lighting. She sat cross-legged on my living room floor while I told her everything: the accusation, the screaming, the boxes thrown into the yard, the way my mother never asked a single question about whether any of it was true. When I finished, Tara leaned back against the couch and said something that made my stomach tighten. "That story is too clean." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Elena didn't panic and invent that on the spot, Tara said. "She built it before she needed it." I wanted to argue with her, mostly because I was exhausted enough to start doubting myself. Or maybe I missed something I said quietly. Maybe I did introduce Michael to someone at the museum and didn't realize it would cause problems. Tara set down her fork and looked straight at me. "Lena," she said, "that's exactly what people like Elena rely on." I didn't answer. "They make you question your own memory," she continued, "while they guide everyone else toward the version that protects them." Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Stop thinking emotionally. Start thinking historically." What happened before the lie? The next afternoon, I was in the museum's storage room, relabeling a set of old brass navigation instruments when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tara. 3 words. "Olivia Hart will talk." Then, another message. "Don't waste it." Olivia Hart had co-chaired several charity galas with my sister. She was one of those socially observant people who remembered everything, who arrived late, who left early, who smiled too quickly, who drank too much, who said one thing in public and something completely different in the hallway 5 minutes later. If anyone noticed strange details about Elena's life, it would be Olivia. We met her that evening at a quiet wine bar near Marion Square. She was already sitting at a corner table when we arrived, wearing bright red lipstick and the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone who had agreed to something she was already regretting. For the first few minutes, she gave us the usual polished answers. Elena had been under pressure. The divorce was emotional. Families were complicated. But Tara leaned forward across the table and lowered her voice. "That's a very elegant explanation," she said calmly, "but it doesn't answer the real question." Olivia stopped stirring the ice in her glass. Tara held her gaze. Why, she asked quietly, was Elena so ready to blame Lena? Olivia went silent. For a long moment she didn't say anything at all. Then she looked around the bar, leaned closer to us, and lowered her voice. Because, she said softly, she was already afraid of something else. My pulse jumped. "What something else?" I asked. Olivia hesitated. Then she finally spoke. "There were rumors about Elena and someone from the preservation board." Olivia Hart was wearing bright red lipstick and the uneasy expression of someone who already regretted agreeing to this meeting before we had even sat down. At first, she gave us the kind of polished answers people in Charleston's charity circles were famous for. "Elena has been under a lot of pressure," she said carefully. "The divorce has been emotional. Families are complicated." It sounded rehearsed. Tara leaned forward across the table, resting her elbows lightly on the wood. "That's a very elegant explanation, Olivia," she said calmly, "but it doesn't answer the real question." Olivia stopped stirring the ice in her drink. Tara held her gaze. Why, she asked quietly, was Elena so ready to blame Lena? For the first time that evening, Olivia didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her glass and stirred the melting ice once more before lowering her voice. Because she was already afraid of something else. My pulse jumped. "What something else?" I asked. Olivia hesitated for a moment, clearly debating whether she had already said too much. Then she sighed softly. There were rumors, she said, about Elena and someone from the preservation board. Tara and I exchanged a quick look. What kind of rumors? I asked. Nothing public, Olivia replied quickly. Just whispers. The kind that float around charity committees and donor dinners. But enough of them that Elena started watching Michael closely. Watching him? I asked. Olivia nodded. Almost like she needed him to be guilty of something before anyone looked too hard at her. That was the first real crack in the story. Up until that moment, everything about Elena's accusation had sounded dramatic, but strangely neat. Too neat. Now it started to feel like something else entirely. What rumors, exactly? Tara asked. Olivia lowered her voice even further. There was a man, she said. Someone who works with the preservation board during spring restoration events. She paused. Then she gave us a name. Victor Hale. The name meant nothing to me. But Olivia continued before I could ask. He handles logistics for the Spring Harbor Preservation Weekend, she explained. Schedules guest lists, hotel arrangements, transportation. If anyone knows who is where during those events, it's him. Tara leaned back slowly. If someone were sneaking around, she said quietly, Victor would know. Olivia nodded once. After that, she didn't say much more. She finished her drink, muttered something about having an early meeting the next morning, and left the wine bar looking like someone who had just stepped too far into a story she wanted no part of. For a long moment after she was gone, I just sat there staring at the surface of my glass. Tara was already grabbing her bag. Her eyes had that sharp, focused look she got when she smelled a puzzle. But when I got home that night, something inside me shifted. The adrenaline drained away and left behind something far uglier. Exhaustion. The kind that crawls into your bones and whispers that disappearing would be easier than fighting. I sat at the small kitchen table in my carriage apartment staring at the unread messages from my mother. Each one asking me to be reasonable. For a few minutes, I seriously considered letting everything go. Let them keep their story. Let Elena keep her lie. Let the entire family believe I was the problem if it meant I could finally have peace. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Tara. It was a photo of the crooked kitchen drawer in my apartment. The one that never fully closed. Underneath the picture, she had written one sentence. Even this drawer knows it's broken. Doesn't mean you pretend it works. I laughed out loud despite myself. It was such a stupid message. But it worked. Because the next morning, instead of giving up, I went to meet Victor Hale. Victor met us at a small oyster restaurant near the harbor. From the second he sat down, it was obvious he hated mess. He looked like the kind of man who ironed his shirts while listening to classical music and set calendar reminders for things most people trusted themselves to remember. His watch gleamed under the sunlight. His posture was perfectly straight. And his first sentence told me immediately that this meeting was going to matter. I'm not here for revenge, he said calmly. I'm here because your sister crossed a line. That statement alone told me more than gossip ever could. Men like Victor Hale didn't step into family drama unless their silence had started to feel like guilt. He folded his hands neatly on the table. The rumors about Elena didn't start recently, he said. They started months before the divorce filing. Tara leaned forward. What kind of rumors? Victor looked at me before answering. The kind that make people start paying attention to hotel room assignments, he said quietly. Victor Hale didn't rush his explanation. He spoke carefully like a man used to organizing complicated situations into clean timelines. Your sister had been spending a lot of time with someone named Ethan Cole, he said. I frowned. The name meant nothing to me. Victor continued. Ethan is a preservation consultant. Married. He moves around the nonprofit restoration world doing advisory work for historical properties. He's one of those people who shows up everywhere, but somehow never officially belongs anywhere. At first, Victor explained, no one thought much about it. Elena and Ethan worked on the same committees. They attended the same donor planning sessions. They appeared at the same restoration weekends. Everything could easily be explained away. Professional collaboration, event coordination, fundraising logistics. But then the pattern started shifting. There were late-night strategy calls that stretched past midnight. There were unusual hotel room adjustments during board retreats. And then there were two moments Victor couldn't forget. Elena started asking strange questions about Michael, he said. What kind of questions, I asked. Victor leaned back slightly in his chair. She wanted to know which women your brother-in-law had been speaking to during museum events, whether he seemed distracted, whether anyone had noticed him talking to someone new. Tara frowned. That sounds like a wife who suspects her husband, she said. Victor shook his head. No, he replied quietly. It sounded like someone preparing a defense before the accusation even existed. My chest went cold. You're sure about that? I asked. Victor gave me a look so steady it almost made me feel embarrassed for asking. Lena, he said calmly, I manage people for a living. I know the difference between panic and planning. Then he reached into his folder and slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. I opened it. It was a logistics document from one of the Charleston Harbor preservation weekends. Most of the page was completely ordinary. Arrival schedules, vendor contacts, room assignments, transportation notes. But in the margin there were two small handwritten adjustments. Quiet changes that most people would never notice. I read the names twice. Elena Ross, Ethan Cole. Same floor, same wing. Quiet reassignment. No spouses copied on the update. Tara let out a slow breath. I stared at the paper and felt my stomach tighten. It was something, but it wasn't enough. Not for parents like mine, and definitely not against someone like Elena. She could explain this away, I said quietly. Work coincidence, bad optics, scheduling mistake. Victor nodded. Probably, he agreed. He tapped the paper once. That's why you need something from inside the marriage. Before I could ask the obvious question, he said the name himself. Michael Grant, Elena's husband. Victor continued speaking calmly. He suspected something was wrong long before the divorce filing, but Elena moved first. Once she started accusing people loudly enough, everyone stopped asking questions. That night, I sent Michael a message. I expected silence, or anger, or maybe a polite refusal to get involved in the drama between his wife and her sister. Instead, he replied in less than 10 minutes. Tomorrow works. We met the next morning on a shaded bench in Liberty Square Park. Michael looked like someone who had been losing sleep for months and had only recently admitted it to himself. He didn't waste time. Elena told both of our families that you introduced me to some woman through the museum, he said. She said, emotional boundaries got crossed. I looked him directly in the eye. Did they? His face hardened immediately. No. He shook his head once. I spoke to that donor twice, both times in public. Both conversations lasted maybe 5 minutes. He leaned forward slightly. Elena needed a story where she looked hurt instead of guilty. I handed him the document Victor had given me. Michael read it slowly. His jaw tightened with every line. I knew it, he muttered quietly. Then he told me something that changed everything. Months earlier, one of Elena's hotel confirmations had accidentally synced to an old shared tablet they used at home. She deleted it before he could save it. But he remembered the hotel name. Because it wasn't a hotel they had ever used together. And they had absolutely no reason to. When he said the name out loud, my entire body went still. Because I knew that hotel. The moment Michael said the hotel's name, my entire body went still. The Ashcroft Harbor House Hotel. It was a small boutique property just outside Charleston, the kind of quiet, historic place nonprofits loved using for donor weekends and preservation retreats. I knew that hotel. The year before, the Maritime Museum had hosted a fundraising dinner there. I had coordinated the reservation contacts and guest logistics for the entire event, which meant something important. If Elena had reused an old reservation profile connected to that event, and if she had forgotten to remove my museum email address from the back-end notification system, then any billing correction automated booking notice or administrative update could easily have been sent to me by mistake. It was a long shot, a very long shot. And before we could even chase that possibility, the universe threw us a distraction. That same afternoon, Olivia Hart sent Tara a frantic message filled with new gossip. Apparently, a woman from Elena's church was claiming that Ethan Cole wasn't even the only man Elena had gotten too close to. For 2 hours, Tara and I chased that rumor down. We called people. We searched social media. We tried connecting names and events. It led absolutely nowhere. A dead end. Bad gossip. Maybe even deliberate noise designed to muddy the waters. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table surrounded by a growing pile of notes and documents. My head ached from staring at details that refused to connect. What if this whole thing is just whispers and coincidence? I said finally. Tara leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms folded. Then we find out, she replied calmly. And we stop. I looked up at her. But we do not stop, she added, just because Elena is better at performing than you are. She was right. If I confronted my sister with half proof, she would cry. She would twist the story, and somehow I would end up looking like the villain again. So instead of confronting Elena, I opened my laptop and started searching for something she couldn't manipulate. Something she couldn't perform her way around. Something written down. The next day was torture. I spent the entire morning at the museum pretending to function like a normal human being while my thoughts kept circling the same possibility. At lunch, I went into the archive office and started digging through the digital files from last year's donor dinner at the Ashcroft Harbor House Hotel. Every logistics sheet, every rooming list, every administrative contact profile tied to that event. For almost an hour, I found nothing useful. Then I saw it. An internal reservation profile attached to the nonprofit event file. My museum email address was listed as a secondary administrative contact for booking adjustments and billing corrections, not for private guest notes, not for confidential messages, but for the overflow administrative notices that hotels send when reservations change or corrections are made. The kind of messages nobody ever thinks about until something goes wrong. If Elena had reused part of that event profile while making a private booking and forgot to remove my email address, the hotel system could absolutely send something to me by mistake. And that was all I needed. Not proof. Just a path. I drafted a careful email to the hotel's guest relations department. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't mention my sister. I didn't mention an affair or a divorce or anything remotely personal. I simply explained that I believed my museum email might still be attached to an old reservation profile from a previous nonprofit event. Then I politely asked whether any recent administrative notices or billing summaries might have been sent to my address in error. I read the message 3 times before sending it. Then I clicked send and waited. After sending the message to the hotel, I tried very hard not to become the kind of person who refreshed their inbox every 3 minutes like a maniac. I failed. For the rest of that afternoon, I checked my email constantly. Every buzz from my phone made my heart jump. Nothing came. The following morning was worse. I went to work at the museum pretending to focus on catalog updates while my brain ran the same question in circles. Had I imagined the connection by early afternoon, I started convincing myself the lead was dead. By 3 o'clock, I hated myself for even hoping. And by 4, I was standing alone in the museum's preparation room, holding a restored brass compass, staring at the needle spinning slowly back into place. A thought crossed my mind that felt heavier than all the others. Maybe proof wouldn't matter anyway. Maybe my parents had already chosen the story they preferred, because it was easier than admitting they had thrown their daughter out of the house over a lie. Then my phone buzzed. One new email. Sender Ashcroft Harbor House. Guest relations subject line, correction of secondary notification contact/attached billing summary. I set the compass down carefully on the table, then I opened the message. The first line was polite and professional. The second line changed everything. The hotel apologized for the inconvenience and confirmed that my email address had mistakenly remained attached as a secondary notification contact on a reused executive reservation profile. Attached to the message were the corrected booking notices and billing summaries that had been automatically generated before the error was discovered. My hands didn't shake. Not at first. I downloaded the attachment and opened the PDF. Then I read every single page. Name, Elena Ross. Name, Ethan Cole. 2 adjoining suites. 2 separate weekends. Privacy preference requested. Late night wine service. Valet records. Room service after midnight. And 1 short note from hotel staff about discreet access arrangements through a side entrance. I stopped breathing for a moment. Then I went back to the email itself and read it again from the beginning. I needed to be absolutely certain I understood what I was looking at. And there it was. Plain, professional, devastating. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't an anonymous message or a rumor passed through a charity committee. It was an administrative correction from the hotel itself, explaining that my old museum email had remained attached to a reused reservation profile. The records had been generated automatically before the mistake was fixed. Which meant they were real. Which meant they were time-stamped. Which meant they were impossible to explain away with tears or dramatic storytelling. That was the email, the one that made my family panic. A boring official document confirming that my sister had been exactly where she should not have been, with exactly the man she should not have been with, during the same weeks she was accusing me of destroying her marriage. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened my messages and texted Tara 3 words. I have it. If you think this email is about to expose the entire truth, leave a 1 in the comments. I'm curious how many of you can already see where this is going. I'll be reading every single comment. Tara called me immediately. Read it to me, she said, the moment I answered. So I did. I read every line of the email, every detail from the attachment, every entry from the billing summary. By the time I finished, she was already in her car. We met in the museum parking lot 15 minutes later. The late afternoon sun was reflecting off the windshield as we sat there with my phone between us, the PDF open on the screen. Tara read the document silently one more time. Then she leaned back in the seat and let out a slow breath. This, she said quietly, is why people like Elena fear paperwork. I looked at her. Drama can be argued with, she continued. Records can't. She was right. What I had in my hands wasn't rumor, emotion, or interpretation. It was documentation. And it gave me a choice. I could send the email immediately to my parents and let the truth detonate all at once. Or I could confront Elena first. I chose confrontation. Partly because I wanted to see her face when the performance finally failed. Partly because cornered liars often reveal more than they intend. Her townhouse was only 15 minutes away. When she opened the door, she looked perfectly composed. Cream sweater, polished makeup, perfect hair. If you hadn't seen her crying in my parents' yard the week before, you would never have believed it was the same woman. What do you want? She snapped. I stepped inside before she could block the doorway. I want to know, I said calmly, why you blamed me for your divorce before anyone even asked what you were hiding. She laughed once, sharp and dismissive. You're unbelievable. I held up my phone. Ashcroft Harbor House disagrees. The reaction was small. So small most people probably would have missed it. But I didn't. There was a flicker in her eyes. A pause. 1 tiny second where the actress inside her missed her cue. What are you talking about? She asked. I handed her the first page of the billing summary. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Her eyes dropped to the screen. When she looked up again, something had changed. The performance was gone. Fear had taken its place. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From the email your carelessness sent to the wrong person," I replied. For a moment she tried denial, then outrage, then offense. "So now you're spying on me," she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "You reused an old reservation profile and accidentally exposed yourself." She turned away and walked a few steps toward the living room window. Then she said something that made the entire room go cold. Michael was already leaving anyway. I stepped closer. "Then why blame me?" She spun around and hissed the answer. "Because you were convenient." 4 words. That was it. No apology, no regret, no panic, just entitlement. My life had been easier to sacrifice than her reputation. In that moment, the last piece of sympathy I still carried for my sister disappeared. I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I simply turned and walked out. Halfway down the block, my phone started lighting up. First my mother, then my stepfather, then Elena. Call after call after call. I didn't answer any of them. They already knew. The only question left now was what I was going to do with the truth. That night, Tara and I spread everything across my kitchen table like we were assembling a legal case instead of surviving a family betrayal. Victor Hale's rooming notes, Michael's timeline, screenshots of Elena's accusations, the hotel email itself, the attached billing summaries. Every detail mattered. The wording mattered. The order mattered. But most important of all, the source mattered. Because once the truth was written down clearly enough, no one would be able to pretend they misunderstood it. If I had simply forwarded the hotel billing summaries, Elena would have said I stole them. She would have claimed I manipulated them or took them out of context. That was exactly the kind of argument she was good at. But the guest relations email changed everything. It explained clearly why those records had been sent to me in the first place. It documented the administrative mistake. It showed the hotel itself acknowledging that my email address had remained attached to an old reservation profile. That made the evidence harder to twist. So Tara and I built the message carefully. No screaming, no insults, no emotional speeches, just chronology and proof. We organized every piece of information in order. The accusation Elena had made against me, the correction notice from the Ashcroft Harbor House Hotel, the attached booking summaries that documented Elena Ross and Ethan Cole reserving adjoining suites during the same period she had been accusing me of destroying her marriage. I addressed the email to my mother, my stepfather, Michael Grant, and Elena. The subject line read, "Correction of false accusation and attached documentation." Inside the email, I explained that I had been falsely accused of causing Elena's marriage to collapse by introducing Michael to another woman. I stated that earlier that morning I had received an administrative correction from the Ashcroft Harbor House Hotel, confirming that my museum email had mistakenly remained attached to a reused reservation profile. I explained that the attached records documented Elena Ross and Ethan Cole reserving adjoining suites during the exact time Elena had redirected suspicion toward me. Then I attached the hotel email itself. After that came the billing summaries. At the very end, I wrote one final sentence. I will not continue carrying blame that was created to protect someone else's betrayal. I sent the email at 8:12 that morning. 7 minutes later, Elena called. Then she called again. Then my mother. Then my stepfather. I didn't answer any of them. At 8:29, the text messages started. Elena, please don't send that email to anyone else. My mother. We were wrong. Please give us another chance. My stepfather. We need to talk. Come home. Then another message from him appeared. This needs to stay private. Private. That word almost made me laugh. There had been nothing private about having my belongings thrown into the yard like trash. I stared at the screen, and remembered the sound of his voice telling me I wasn't worthy of the family. Then I typed 2 words. No. Never. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Michael. I still hadn't silenced his number. When I answered, he didn't speak right away. Finally, he said quietly, "Thank you." Not because he was happy, not because the truth made divorce easier, but because someone had finally written down what Elena had spent weeks trying to bury under performance. He told me his attorney would use the email and the attachments. He also mentioned something else. Ethan Cole's wife had already questioned some unexplained hotel charges months earlier. She had been given vague explanations. Now she had reason to stop accepting them. Around noon, a volunteer from the museum came into my office looking uneasy. "There's a woman in the lobby asking for you," she said. "She seems very upset." The moment I walked downstairs and saw my mother standing beneath the mural of storm-tossed ships, twisting the strap of her purse in her hands, I knew exactly why she had come. "Lena, please," she said the moment she saw me. "Don't do this to us." That word, us, landed like an insult. "You already did something to me," I said quietly. "You threw me out without asking one single question." She started crying immediately. "Elena told us I know what Elena told you," I interrupted. "What I want to know is why my own mother didn't care whether it was true." She tried the usual explanations: emotion, confusion, family panic. But eventually the real reason slipped out. "If this spreads," she whispered, "Elena could lose everything." There it was. Not grief for me, fear for her. "She should have thought about that before she used my life as padding," I said. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Come home," she whispered. "We can fix this." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I answered quietly, "A house is not a home when it throws out the wrong daughter to protect the guilty one." That evening, my stepfather sent a message asking me to come to the house for one conversation. I went. Part of me needed to hear what the truth sounded like in that living room once Elena's lie stopped working. When I arrived at the house that evening, Elena was already there. She looked pale and tense, but anger still burned in her eyes. My mother had placed a box of tissues on the coffee table like she was preparing for a performance. My stepfather stood behind his chair with his arms folded as if posture alone could restore some kind of authority to the room. He spoke first. "You've made your point." I shook my head. "No," I said calmly. "The documents made the point. I just forwarded them." Elena immediately started talking. About pressure. About loneliness. About how marriages are complicated and mistakes happen when people feel overwhelmed. Then she softened her voice, lowering it into the familiar tone she used whenever she wanted sympathy. "I never meant for Lena to get hurt this badly." I stared at her. "You used my name before anyone even asked questions," I said quietly. "You absolutely meant for me to get hurt enough to save you." For the first time that evening, nobody interrupted me. The room went silent. Finally, my stepfather spoke again. "What do you want?" That question hit harder than I expected. Because it was the first real question anyone in that house had asked me since the night my belongings were thrown into the yard. "I want the truth," I said. Then I spoke slowly so no one could pretend they misunderstood. "I did not cause your divorce. I did not betray this family. I was thrown out of this house because Elena lied." The silence stretched across the room. My stepfather finally spoke without looking directly at me. "You didn't cause the divorce." My mother added quietly, "We acted too quickly. Not cruelly, not shamefully. Too quickly." I turned to Elena. "Do you admit it?" She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she whispered one word. "Yes." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt thin, late, cowardly. And then my stepfather ruined even that moment. "Now we need to handle this as a family." That was when I understood exactly what they wanted. Not justice, Not healing, containment. I stood up. "You're not asking for forgiveness," I said. "You're asking for control." No one denied it. So I walked out. For the second time. And this time, nobody pretended they didn't know why. Once the truth had been written down, it stopped belonging only to my family. Michael's attorney requested copies of the hotel email and the attachments, and I sent them. Within the same week, Ethan Cole quietly resigned from 2 preservation committees. One donor family withdrew their sponsorship from an event Elena had been scheduled to host. Another charity co-chair suddenly found a scheduling conflict and stepped away from working with her. None of that happened because I went around Charleston telling people my business. It happened because once proof exists, people start asking their own questions, and Elena had built her entire life on the assumption that nobody ever would. 3 days later, she showed up at my carriage apartment. She stood outside the screen door with no makeup, no polished smile, no audience watching. Her arms were wrapped around herself as if she were cold. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stayed where I was and kept the door between us. "Say what you came to say." She looked smaller than usual, but not softer. That difference mattered. "Ethan is denying everything beyond friendship," she said. "Michael is using the records. Mom can't sleep. Dad won't even look at me." Then she said something that made it clear she still didn't understand anything. "You got what you wanted." I shook my head. "No," I said. "What I wanted was not to be thrown out of my home over your lie." Her jaw tightened. "I was desperate," she said. "You were deliberate," I replied. She flinched slightly. For a moment I thought I saw something like honesty in her expression. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. "It went exactly as far as you allowed it to," I answered. "As long as it landed on me instead of you." Then she asked the question that almost made me laugh. "Can you talk to Michael?" she said. "Ask him to be reasonable." I actually did laugh then. "You blamed me for your divorce. You got me thrown out of my own house. And now you want me to help manage the fallout." "I'm your sister," she snapped. "You were," I said quietly. "Right up until the moment you decided my life was acceptable collateral." She stared at me as if I had betrayed her, which would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. "So that's it," she demanded. "You're cutting me off forever." I thought about the years of excuses, the way she had called me convenient, the complete absence of a real apology. "No," I said finally. "You cut me off first. I'm just refusing to crawl back." She left furious. Oddly enough, that made me feel lighter. Anger meant she had heard me, even if she would never admit it. That night, my mother called asking me to be compassionate. 2 days later, my stepfather sent a message suggesting family counseling now that everything was out in the open. I ignored both. Not because I wanted revenge anymore, but because I had finally learned the difference between healing and being dragged back into someone else's performance. Around the same time, my museum director asked me to come to her office. I walked in expecting the worst. I thought Ethan Cole's name might spill into my professional life. Instead, she said something completely different. "I've heard there may be personal fallout touching some nonprofit circles," she told me. "If anyone tries to drag the museum or your role into gossip, we will shut that down immediately." I almost cried right there in her office, because it was the first time in weeks someone had protected me without needing to be convinced. Weeks passed. The carriage apartment started to feel less like exile and more like a beginning. Tara helped me paint one wall a deep sea blue. "You need at least one surface in this place that looks like a future," she said. She also kept bringing small practical gifts. A toolbox. Better kitchen towels. Labels for my pantry jars. A lamp that actually lit the entire room. Every one of those small things meant more than the emotional messages my family started sending once they realized I wasn't automatically coming back. Eventually, my mother left me a voicemail. "I know we failed you. It was the closest thing to a real apology she ever gave. My stepfather never got that far. His remorse remained procedural, as if one corrected statement could somehow balance public humiliation. It couldn't. And in the quiet that followed everything, I realized something about revenge stories that people almost never say out loud. Revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's simply about refusing to keep carrying what they tried to place on your shoulders. Sometimes it means letting the truth do the hard work, while you quietly step out from under the lie. About a month after the email, Michael Grant asked if we could meet one last time at a small coffee shop near the Charleston harbor. By then, the divorce had moved past the shock stage and into logistics. Michael didn't look as shattered as he had the first time we met, but there was still a deep exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that betrayal leaves behind. After we sat down, he reached into his bag and slid a document across the table. "You may want this," he said. I looked down at the paper. It was a signed statement. In clear, plain language, Michael confirmed that I had never interfered in his marriage, never encouraged any inappropriate relationship, and had been falsely blamed after Elena Ross's involvement with Ethan Cole began to surface. I stared at the document for a long time. For weeks, I had been defending my reality against a lie that seemed to spread faster than truth ever could. And now, there it was, in writing. From the one person whose voice made Elena's accusation impossible to resurrect. "You didn't have to do this," I told him quietly. He gave a tired half-smile. "Maybe not," he said. "But I'm done watching Elena rewrite everything." Then he added something that stayed with me much longer than the document itself. "You were the only honest person in a house full of performance." That sentence cut deeper than he probably realized. Because that was the real center of the entire story. Performance. Elena performed victimhood. My mother performed peace. My stepfather performed authority. And for years I had performed forgiveness, hoping that if I kept being patient long enough, fairness would eventually follow. It never did. Once I stopped performing, everything changed. A few weeks later, my parents brought over the last of my belongings that were still at their house. My mother cried quietly in the driveway while we unloaded the boxes. My stepfather carried the heaviest one inside, as if silent labor could somehow replace the apology he never quite managed to say. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "There will always be a place for you with us." I answered simply. There wasn't when it mattered. For once, he had no reply. And strangely, that silence felt more honest than anything else he had said during the entire ordeal. Not long after that, Elena moved out of the townhouse she had shared with Michael. Ethan Cole quietly disappeared from several nonprofit committees. My sister didn't lose absolutely everything. People like Elena rarely do. But she did lose one thing she had relied on her entire life: the ability to control the story before the facts arrived. As for me, I stayed in Charleston. I kept my job at the museum. Slowly, I started sleeping through the night again. The carriage apartment stopped feeling like exile and started feeling like a beginning. Tara kept insisting I looked taller lately. Maybe she was right. Shame bends your spine in ways grief never does. On the anniversary of the night I was thrown out, my mother sent me a text. "I still pray you come back to us." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I came back to myself. That has to be enough. And it was. Because the real ending to this story isn't just that one email changed everything, it's how it changed everything. The email came from the Ashcroft Harbor House Hotel. Guest relations had sent it to correct a contact error Elena never noticed. It explained that my museum email address had remained attached to a reused reservation profile and included billing summaries showing Elena Ross and Ethan Cole booking adjoining suites during the same week she was accusing me of destroying her marriage. One email. That was all it took. It exposed the affair. It exposed the lie. It exposed how quickly my family had chosen convenience over truth. And it exposed how frightened they became the moment paperwork replaced drama. That's why the messages arrived so quickly that morning. Not because they suddenly loved me more, but because they suddenly understood I had proof. People often talk about revenge as if it has to look like fire to matter. Mine didn't. Mine looked like a clean subject line, a hotel attachment, and the end of my cooperation. Mine looked like refusing to come home just because the people who broke me had finally become afraid. Mine looked like two simple words. No, never. My mother threw me out because my sister blamed me for her divorce. Then one email changed everything. Not because it created the truth, but because it forced everyone hiding from it to finally see it written down. Living through that experience taught me something I didn't understand before. Truth alone is not always enough, but the courage to stand by it can change everything. Being blamed, rejected, and doubted by the people closest to me hurt more than any stranger's judgment ever could. Yet it also forced me to learn self-respect, patience, and the strength to let facts speak louder than emotions. I often wonder what you would do if you were in my place. Would you fight to prove the truth, or would you quietly walk away and start over? If you're still here listening to the very end, I truly appreciate you. Stories like this are not just mine. They belong to anyone who has ever been misunderstood. And by being here, you're helping those voices feel less alone. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, liking, or sharing the video. Sometimes a simple action from you can help the right story reach someone who needs it most.